On this episode, we talk with returning guest economist Jessica Vechbanyongratana.
So, if you want some data-backed insight into how Thailand is doing during Corona, you'll dig this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap, this is the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 after being chased by a moose on a hike and getting so scared that I left and never looked back.
Dude, moose are scary, man. They're not animals. They're megafauna, dude.
They're dinosaurs almost, yeah.
Heck yeah. And I met Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract 20 years ago. Fell in love with actually being treated with a measure of respect by my students. So I never left.
Are you being facetious or is that legit?
That's pretty straightforward. It's pretty much just the truth. All right.
Cool.
All right. We want to say a quick thank you to one of our patrons who only goes by the initial JR, who supports us at the show shout-out level. Stick around after my interview with returning guest economist Jessica Vechbanyongratana to hear why JR will remain anonymous. And a huge thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons got a whole bunch of cool stuff, including our ad-free regular show a day early, behind-the-scenes photos and videos of our listeners, discounts on swag, which you can find on our website, and various other things that aren't available to regular listeners. But best of all, patrons like JR also get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we riff on current events and random topics. We just finished recording this week's bonus show, and we chatted about how Greg got yelled at by his wife because their son made fun of a Buddhist ceremony, the Thai government's secret plan to smuggle some tourists into Phuket to test the bubble theory out, and the upcoming ban on booze that's ordered online or electronically. To become a patron, head to bangkokpodcast.com/support.
Yeah, all right. Well, before we jump into this week's show, we want to announce a small but kind of new, interesting thing we're trying out. It's actually a suggestion from our buddy Hoon, who is listening from the U.S., and if you use the Line chat app, you can add our official account and add us as a friend. And we want you to send us some voice messages. Just record a short clip with a comment or a joke or greeting or whatever. Tell us where you live and how things look where you are. Just say hi, and we might play it on the show. So if you go to your Line app and add us as a friend, and then hit the little microphone button and hold down the record button to get your voice in there, and then send it on over. And we're going to put the QR code in the show notes on our website. So if you want, just head there at bangkokpodcast.com on this episode and scan the QR code. Boom, you're automatically added as a friend. Send us a voice message. It'll be fun.
Yeah, man, I think this is a great idea. I want to hear what our listeners have to say. So if you just think we're great, you can send us a message like that. Or if you got a joke, if you got an idea for the show, anything. We want to hear from you.
Yeah. Good idea from Hoon. Thanks, Hoon. And also, really quickly, this happens sometimes because we've got so many ways to contact us on the internet. Someone sent an article to us from an old California newspaper clipping from 1857. It was a short story on the Thai king's all-female bodyguard.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and I wanted to get back to the guy and say, it took me a few days to get around to it, and I don't know where the message is. So I don't know if it's on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, email. So if you're listening out there, thanks for sending us in, whoever you are. And I thought it was a really interesting little read, but I don't know where you are. So
you
I can't find the message anymore.
It's funny you mentioned that because that happens to me sometimes with students where, like, some student sends me a message and I remember, but then I can't find it. I'm like, because there's email, there's chat, there's all these different ways they can reach me.
Yeah, and it's especially egregious because at the end of every show we always say we always respond to our messages. So.
Right.
Yeah, all right. Okay, on this episode, we welcome back our senior economics correspondent, Chulalongkorn Professor Jessica Vechbanyongratana. Now, obviously, Thailand's economy is getting the crap kicked out of it right now, But crap kicks are not really a scientific way to measure the health of a country's economy. So thankfully, Jessica provides us some numbers-driven insight into what's going on with imports and exports, how the Thai labor market and its laborers are coping, and what the government is doing to try and pull the country out of this long COVID nightmare. Plus, she answers a bunch of listener questions from our patrons. So here is my interview with Jessica Vechbanyongratana. All right. Well, we are very happy to have back on the show our previous guest, who I most recently talked to. I think it was in January or so, but her show didn't air until March, maybe.
It was more like June, wasn't
June? Oh man, I can't remember. I don't even know what. I don't barely even know what year it is, but I don't know what month it is. Anyway, we are talking with Jessica Vechbanyongratana, an economist at Chulalongkorn University. I thought you coming on the show last time was super fascinating. We got a lot of great feedback on that, and it gives us some insight into what's happening in Thailand in these very strange times from an economist point of view, but not in the nerdy, boring way that a lot of economists maybe have the reputation of, but sort of a cool, interesting way backed up with stats and numbers instead of just me every week spouting off random opinions that I have no basis to know. So welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much.
So let's start with just a quick overview. I guess we can sum up Thailand's economy right now as quote unquote not good. But how would someone who is actually smart with economics describe what's happening right now?
Yeah. Okay. Well, in technical terms, we would describe the economy as not good.
Ooh, I was right.
So it's funny. I was thinking about this, and I was actually on a panel with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce back in, I think it was the first week of January, and the event was called the Crystal Ball. And so there's a whole bunch of us from different walks of the economy and talking about, what is our outlook for 2020. And I was actually on the panel with Paul Gambles from MBMG. I think a lot of expats probably know Paul from different places, but so we were on this panel, and our outlook was pretty bleak.
Yeah.
So this was first week of January. And so at the end of 2019, we were saying, okay, we have a strong baht, we've got trade war, we've got a long persistent drought going on. And so it's affecting workers directly in manufacturing, accommodation, and food service and agriculture. And those three areas of the economy make up about 57% of our workforce. And we were really predicting a really rough 2020. I was expecting unemployment rates to go up a little bit, but then COVID happened.
So even before COVID, things weren't so good.
Yeah. So, I mean, COVID has hit and basically amplified everything. And I met up with Paul a couple of weeks back at another event, and we're like, hey, haven't seen you since January. And we were reminiscing about, what we had predicted at the beginning of the year. I mean, we were like, yeah, economy looks dire. And we said, well, at least we're in the right direction. We were off by about 10 times, but, it didn't look good beforehand. And it's
right. The good old days when the outlook was merely dire rather than catastrophic.
Exactly. So it's not good. But of course, there's always, caveats to that. But overall, the economy is pretty dire.
Yeah. And how does GDP work into that? Is that an accurate representation of how we can follow what's happening? What do the numbers say?
Okay, so GDP, so this is kind of the accounting of the value of all goods and services that are produced within an economy. And it's kind of an easy way for us to look at the health and strength of the economy. Not a perfect number, but it is a number that is comparable across different countries, for example. So we can see, is the value of what we're producing in the economy, is it sort of higher or lower than other economies, and so on. And that is kind of like the headline number that everybody looks for.
Right.
So when we have kind of the updates on the economy, that's what they're talking about. And we just got the quarter two report on the GDP.
Oh.
And it's it's dire. So the definition is the value of goods and services that are produced within the economy within some sort of set time. And if we look at the year-on-year change in the economy or GDP, we actually had a decline of 12.2%.
Yikes.
From
That's big.
Q2 last year. Yeah, it is big. It's a lot, and it's a lot more. It is a lot more than was initially kind of forecast. I mean, so initially we saw people saying, "Oh, probably -5%," and they kept getting adjusted down, maybe -8%, maybe -10%, and then the numbers actually come out, and it's -12 year on year. So it's not good. So, but of course, the GDP itself is just one big number, but it's made up of a lot of smaller numbers. It's made up of all kinds of production across the entire economy. And of course, with the lockdown that we had in March and April and May, I mean, what's the thing that got affected the most?
Tourism.
Exactly, tourism, right? So, I mean, basically everything shut down. Hotels shut down, restaurants shut down. And so it's not surprising that we had a reduction in the GDP numbers. And so tourism, of course, tourism was down by, let's see, about 50%.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So,
and only 50%? Because, I mean, you see on Twitter over the past week or so, there's just been pictures of Khao San Road, which is shut.
Right.
Like wouldn't be surprised if tourism was down 90%.
Yeah, but you have to remember Q2 sort of spans several months, right?
Okay.
So it started slightly before the lockdown, and everything has been lifted now, and so we do have domestic tourism and so on. But yeah, I mean,
it's juicing the numbers a little bit. But.
So yeah, it probably would have been worse if we'd looked at just like say May.
Okay.
But yeah, so the official numbers at least say down 50%. But then of course other sectors of the economy with the shutting down of supply chains and so on. We had, shipping was down by about almost 39%, manufacturing and industry down 14%, retail, of course, was shut down for a while and they're down about 10%.
Wow.
And so everything kind of got hit really hard in the second quarter. But there's other areas that actually were positive. So
really?
I know there's a few small, and we're talking about small positives, but like communications and also finance activities as well were up slightly, I think just above zero. But some of the numbers that they're reporting is that expenditures on food was actually up by 3%. Communications was up by 2.6%. Expenditures on healthcare was up by 8.9%, which was a little surprising to me just because people were not going to the hospital because they were concerned about COVID.
Yeah, that's right.
So I'm not quite sure what makes that up. Public spending, though, of course, was way up because or at least public spending in construction was up. So construction itself was down.
I mean, that sounds bad. Are we officially in a recession? What's the threshold for that?
So yeah, a recession, there's different definitions of what a recession is. The one I grew up learning was you're in, basically there's negative GDP growth over 2 consecutive quarters. And we've definitely had that. We had negative growth in Q1 and in Q2. So by that definition, we're definitely in a recession. More recent definitions have said that it only is within a few months. And so I was like, well, we've blown that one out of the water. So we're definitely in, I guess, technically in a recession. And I think it's going to be, we're going to be kind of hanging out there for a while.
Right.
So,
Recessionville.
But some people have asked me, are we actually in a depression? And a depression is a much more longer, severe recession. And so if this persists, negative growth persists over a longer period of time, say years, then we'll be in what's called a depression. Are we going there? I'm not sure. So it's a little bit hard to predict that because so much is going to be, of course, dependent on what happens with the world economy, since our economy is so intertwined with the world economy.
So international tourism then I think would probably be the big victim here, the hardest hit out of all of Thailand's economies? Like
I
all
would
of
say,
the
yeah, out
sectors?
of all the sectors of the economy, definitely tourism is going to be the hardest hit and probably be one of the longer hit areas. Manufacturing, of course, was hit hard because we do depend a lot on the export market. We depend on exporting the goods that we produce here, and we've had problems with supply chains, and we've also had problems with, everybody's in a recession right now. So, people are not necessarily, buying the new cars or not necessarily buying higher end electronics or whatever that we produce. And so a lot of that is probably going to take some time to come back, but that again is dependent on the world economy. And so my guess is that over this time period, we're going to see, and we've already seen the shuttering of several businesses within the travel and tourism industry. So I think we're going to kind of see the ones that maybe were just hanging on before COVID hit. These ones are probably going to shutter, and same with the manufacturing firms as well. And then the others will take some time to kind of come back.
Right.
Yeah.
So with a lot of people out of work and businesses closing, people going back home to the provinces, what's happening with the per capita income? Are people really struggling? I mean, we talked about this in a previous show about, from my perspective as a foreigner who has a job still, I don't see the real cracks, the real suffering. I don't see how badly people have it, because in my life, I'm very lucky and I'm relatively sheltered. I'm in my little expat bubble. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of people in my shoes just don't see how really bad it is. Is it as bad as all that? Like, how many people are out of work? Mm-hmm. What's the income look like? What are their prospects? How will they get back on their feet, et cetera, et cetera?
Okay. Yeah. So trying to actually get a handle on all of these numbers. We still don't have official Q2 numbers on unemployment. And so I've gotten a few numbers from a colleague who's seen some early versions of just preliminary numbers from the labor force survey, which is the official survey that we use to count unemployment, and then also other metrics having to do with the health of the labor market. And what I saw, I think maybe a little bit surprising to some people, maybe not so surprising to me, because Thailand has a lot of quirks in its labor market. But I think we talked about in the last show that unemployment is really, really low in Thailand. Mm-hmm. So the official unemployment rate at the end of Q1 was 1%.
Yeah.
And so when I was talking about how dire 2020 was going to be, I was like, we might see a doubling of the unemployment rate from 1% to 2%. Like, that's a huge amount.
Still not bad.
So yeah, I mean, in most countries you would say, 2% is like ridiculously low, but the Thai labor market is a bit quirky because it is highly informal. Right. And when we do the labor force survey, the question that's asked about employment is, have you done any work for pay over the last 7 days? And it doesn't ask you whether that's a formal job or an informal job. I mean, you literally could have been collecting eggs from your chicken and selling it to somebody, and you would have been counted as employed.
We talked about this on when you were on last, about how entrepreneurial Thais are, and how if you somehow come into a box of 1,000 Hello Kitty nail clippers or something, you're going to throw a blanket on the sidewalk and boom, you're a vendor, right?
And you're employed.
Yes, exactly. And that's what's great about Thais in Thailand, is that they hustle.
Yes.
But is that person employed? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, but if you said, well, it's only if you're, actually employed by a proper firm who pays taxes, then, half the economy would be unemployed, or more than half, actually. So about 2/3 would be considered, quote unquote, unemployed in that metric.
That raises an interesting question about how different countries define the word employment, but that's a different conversation.
It's a whole interesting conversation. But so anyway, when the Q2 numbers I looked at, and again, these are not official, these are just sort of like some preliminary numbers that a colleague had shared with me, it looks like the overall unemployment rate has gone up to 2%.
Oh, wow.
So, It's doubled. So I mean, we have to think about that. It has doubled. But what's happening is that people are finding it more difficult to do that, to get the Hello Kitty nail clippers and go sell them on the street. And so when the unemployment rate goes up, for me, that means that the informal sector is having a more difficult time absorbing people that are losing jobs in the formal sector or losing jobs in the informal sector and looking for something else to do. Right. So we have seen an increase in the overall unemployment rate, but it's not huge numbers. It still means that a lot of people have lost their jobs, but are able to do something to tide themselves over, maybe go back. And we saw this during the 1997 financial crisis. There was a huge migration back into the provinces, and all of a sudden the number of farm laborers or farm workers went up because they lost jobs in the factories and went back to their homes. And I suspect that there's quite a bit of that going on as well. But the way that the numbers are, we don't have sort of like one set of numbers to kind of tell us exactly what's going on in terms of, movements of people. And part of that's because we are highly informal. And so it's kind of hard to actually keep track of people. So overall 2% unemployment rate, but that's not the same across all people. So you asked are different people being hit, harder than others? Yeah. And I'm sure that if we looked by industry, so if we looked at the numbers of people who were in travel and tourism and accommodation, they're probably making up a larger proportion of the unemployed. But unfortunately, I don't have those numbers, so I can't tell you for sure. Right. I'm sure it's true. I'm sure it's true. The last employment you had was probably travel and tourism or manufacturing. But I don't have those numbers. What I do have is age breakdown of the unemployed. And it's also, again, kind of as we expect, younger workers are more likely to be out of jobs. And this is pretty much normal across most countries when there's some type of recession or economic shock. The first people to lose their jobs were the last ones to be hired, and those tend to be younger people with less experience and so on. So the unemployment rate among workers who are under 25 looks like it's around 3%. So it is a bit higher, but not super, super high. But for prime age workers, it's still around 1%. So unemployment's overall is not so high, but again, we don't know about the quality of the job. So there's a lot of shifting that was going on. Another thing we look at is hours. So I don't know if you've seen this among a lot of friends and so on. They kept their jobs, but the number of hours were cut back.
So come in 4 days a week or something like that.
Right. So there was a lot of these different arrangements in order to keep people employed in some way or another. And I feel like everybody had their hours cut or their pay cut or something like that, just to keep them employed, trying to get through this tough period and then bring stuff back up later.
So those people are still technically employed.
That's the thing. They're still counted as employed. But what we did see is that the average number of hours worked per week went down by about 5 hours. And that's pretty large. Yeah.
Almost a whole day.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's kind of where, firms were trying to keep their employees and not have to pay severance and all this stuff. So they did so by reducing the hours. But interestingly, pay, again, very preliminary numbers, but the preliminary numbers seem to say that pay didn't change. And which seems really odd for me, with the exception of one sector. It was retail, I think. We see services and retail that seemed to we saw a decline there. So that kind of makes some sense to me that the service economy, we saw some decreases in pay overall. But yeah.
It's so interesting because as a non-economist brain like mine, things like, you have the numbers don't lie. But there's this weird fuzziness around all these numbers. It's like,
there is a fuzziness. And of course, this aggregate numbers, these macro numbers that we use and often use for making policy, don't look to see what's going on at the household level or the individual level. We know, we saw that people, like the number of suicides have gone up over this time period. And a lot of it has been attributed to into financial difficulties, losing jobs. I had a colleague who did some work on the lockdown period, like who was losing those jobs. Of course, a lot of services, lots of tourism, and so on. But it turned out that usually if, let's say you're a married couple and one works in services, the probability that the other one also works in services was quite high. So you tend to be in the same sector. So if one person's laid off, the other one's probably laid off as well.
It's a double hit.
So you get this double hit. And so there's a lot of people who've been hit really, really hard because if you had a double income family, a lot of families lost, at least temporarily, both of those incomes. And so yeah. And I have to say, I mean, I've talked to a lot of people just kind of sort of not as an economist, just observing the world and trying to make sense of what's going on. And I really feel like people fell into one of three categories. You either lost your job, have no work, or you kept your job and your hours went down or your pay was cut in half or whatever, or you're in this third category if you kept your job and all of a sudden you're working like you've never worked before. So there's been some very interesting, I think, dynamics.
So like no one is unaffected by this.
Yeah, I think everybody was affected in some way,
right.
But it's maybe not in the way that we had expected. And I have to say I was in that third category. I've never worked so hard in my life since COVID has hit. So, but yeah.
So before we get into some questions from patrons, what is the government's plan? I mean, obviously right now we're sort of in this anti-government protest, nothing new in Thailand, but they're basically saying that the government has mishandled the economy, blah, blah, blah. And this situation with COVID obviously doesn't help, but what are they doing? What are they working on? What are they hoping to achieve as we sort of slowly crawl our way back out of the Sarlacc pit of COVID? It's a Star Wars inside joke there for fellow nerds.
Yeah, so I mean, the government certainly they have put in lots of measures. So there's kind of the emergency measures to get people through the lockdown and sort of that initial rupture in the economy. So we had the what is it called, the No One Left Behind 5,000 baht per month thing that was halfway a disaster, but I mean, but the people who did get it, I mean, it was, helpful, but there were lots of problems, of course, with distribution and trying to get it out to the people who needed it. Right. They've come back and used some other classifications. So thinking about elderly pensions. So these are generally elderly people who are from the informal sector who don't have, private pensions or, Social Security pensions. My understanding is that they've done some sort of top-ups. And so they've been doing things, the poor card as well. So if you're low income and have been targeted in that poor card program, my understanding is there's also been some top-ups there, although I can't give you the details because I didn't look into it. But so there's been things kind of, in some ways, some of it's been a little bit ad hoc, but trying to get resources to people who need it. In terms of like SMEs, I know that the central bank asked for commercial banks to kind of ease lending restrictions for SMEs, but a lot of people criticize that, saying it didn't go far enough because you had to have a credit history. So if you were solvent and never needed a loan before, you couldn't get a loan now because you weren't in the system. And so it kind of defeats the purpose of,
it's ironic, isn't it?
It's like you were kind of, so being, good with your finances, now you're, being penalized for that.
Yeah,
and so there was some weird stuff like that, but yeah, I mean, they've been doing things. They've been doing a lot of it. They've been doing right. I mean, there's other things that, there's good intentions, but maybe wasn't executed perfectly. They are kind of making this transition, trying to think about, okay, we're through kind of, we hope, what's the pit of, lockdown and so on. Now, how do we get back on track, right? And they are, acknowledging that international tourism is probably not going to come back for quite a while. And so for me, it seems like a lot of policies have kind of shifted towards the domestic market, trying to spark domestic demand. And of course, we had like that travel program that Thais could get, 40% discount on hotels. Right. And so, and a lot of people have taken advantage of that. So that's kind of helped out a particular sector of the economy. I just saw there's a proposal on the table for doing basically credit for shopping. It's kind of like the program they had last year, Chim Chap Chai program. They're kind of redoing that.
Or to sort of induce people to go out and spend money and buy stuff.
Exactly. So I don't even know what the name of the program is, but I just read that they're hoping to bring something back like that. I also read that, and I was talking to another labor economist about this. There is a plan to help subsidize employment of fresh graduates.
Interesting.
And so the proposal on the table is they subsidize 50%, and it's basically 15% of 15,000 baht per month, which is significant. So this is in an effort to get private firms to employ fresh graduates. And there's a lot of concern, right, as I mentioned, that the unemployment rate, of course, is highest among the youngest workers. And there's a lot of numbers being thrown around about, there's 500,000 fresh graduates without jobs. I take issue with that number, but there are a lot of people that are graduating from university and are finding it difficult to find employment. Right. And so this is supposed to help, ease that. And hopefully once they get into the system, if they've been there for a year, which is, I think, how long the subsidy lasts, that the firm is not going to be like, okay, you're out of here.
Yeah.
Hire somebody else, because it's costly, of course, to train new people. And also the hope is that these fresh graduates would be able to gain some skills in those first years rather than trying to get employment, say, driving Grab or doing other sort of like gig economy things that won't help them in terms of getting better employment in the future.
The career development, long-term career development.
Exactly. And there's lots of research to suggest that poor graduates who graduate in a recession, they have lifelong impacts of that, and lower wages, lower, level jobs, and so on. So I think this type of program actually can be helpful.
Yeah.
And I hope it moves forward. I think it's still at the proposal stage, but that type of thing to me kind of makes some sense, and I think it could actually be a positive thing.
Well, let's get to some questions from our patrons then. As you know, when we have a guest coming up ahead of time, we email our patrons and ask them if they have any questions to ask. And we actually got a good number of questions from patrons. As I said, you were a very popular guest, Jessica. People loved hearing from you. So let's jump into those. So this first one is from Joe. And Joe says, can she talk about what the Thai central bank is doing to help businesses, if anything? The U.S. central bank is issuing a ton of debt to stimulate the economy, mostly the stock market, and it's making headlines. Is Thailand acting in a similar way?
Yeah, actually. So a lot of these programs, both sort of these emergency measures that we saw in terms of, loans for SMEs and the no one left behind, and kind of subsidizing the Social Security and having better unemployment benefits. All of this costs money, and they had to get it from somewhere. So, so there is a lot of borrowing going on, and of course, going forward with trying to do these programs that stimulate the domestic economy. Again, any of these subsidies that they give, these are going to come from somewhere. Thailand is lucky in the sense that we were nowhere near sort of that ceiling of the debt to GDP ratio. So there's a point at which you can no longer kind of service your debts.
Right.
And we were way below that. And so that gives us some space to increase our borrowing in order to be able to finance these types of programs. So they are doing it. And, you just always hope that they pick the right programs to finance. But yes, they are. They are. Okay. Yeah.
From Jeremy, he says, how do you compare the economic fallout from COVID to the situation after the 1997 financial crisis? Which one is worse? 97 was pretty bad. I wasn't here then, but I got here in 2001 and I was still seeing the fallout from that.
Yeah, I was in Thailand in 95 and 96, so I just missed it. and then came back, I think, in 2001 as well. It was it was bad. But the cause of the recession in 97, or the financial crisis in 97, was just very, very different than the COVID. The 97 crisis, of course, originated with the financial markets. And so it affected the ability to take loans. People were unable to pay back loans and so on. So it was really, within the financial sector, and then that trickled down into the real sector of the economy. But in a lot of ways, I feel like we bounced back fairly quickly. I think by 2000, 2001, we were kind of back online,
Okay.
and then we had fairly fast growth after that. And just looking at sort of any of the macro measures about employment and GDP and so on, we did bounce back. The difference with what we have going on now is that it's really, again, very global, everybody's not demanding new cars. So it's not that the manufacturer, doesn't have access to loans, or they may have problems trying to pay back their loans if they've got loans out, but because nobody's buying the product. But that's the problem. Nobody's buying the products. And so I feel like this one could be worse in a lot of ways because, again, we're really depending on not just our domestic economy, but we're so dependent on the international economy as well, and with tourism and manufacturing making up really a lot of our GDP. Then we have. It's like it doesn't matter what we do in some senses.
Right.
We've got to wait for everybody else to catch up as
right.
well. So it's really hard to tell what's going to happen. Are we going to have like this huge second wave that's going to wipe out everybody globally? Or, are we going to find a vaccine? And then are we going to be able to kind of really restart the economies all around the world, which will then have effects on Thailand. So if I had to guess, I think in some ways the current crisis may be more severe. But maybe I hope I'm wrong. So unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball. But yeah, it's just that the reasons behind the crises are just very, very different, and so the path to recovery is also going to be quite different.
All right, James asked, is there any safety net, money, food, rent relief available to regular non-connected people to keep them from starving or becoming homeless? Or is it all family support for each other, moving back into the farm and, 15 people in a condo kind of thing?
Yeah, so Thailand's interesting because it does have a lot of safety nets. It may not be huge amounts of money, but we do have actually several different safety nets that in some ways I think has really kind of cushioned the fall compared to like the United States, for example, where there's not a whole lot in the way of safety nets, speaking from experience. So, I mean, of course, one of the biggest safety nets that we have here is health. And so we don't have to worry that we're going to go into bankruptcy because I went to the hospital for what I thought was a cold.
Right.
And so I think people sometimes underestimate that because it's not like a cash handout. It's a service that's provided, but you don't have to pay huge amounts of money to access it. So that's a huge thing. Of course, we have safety nets that were already in place for the elderly. We have the monthly universal pension. And my understanding is there was some top up on top of that during the COVID. There's also, of course, the Poor Card, which is a targeted program, so it doesn't necessarily capture everybody.
It's a terrible name.
So,
they need a rebranding of that. The Poor Card is not.
So I don't remember
cool.
what the. Sometimes I don't know exactly what the official name is. I can think of it in Thai, but I can't think of it in English. But anyways, so there is that. But again, it doesn't like reach everybody.
Right.
And then there's been sort of these ad hoc programs trying to reach more people with some sort of, cash relief and so on.
Okay.
So we do have these, and there's also child payments as well. So at least some people get those as well. So there is something, but I do think that a lot of people do still fall back onto their families, fall back onto the people who are still employed. So you might end up back on on the farm, or 15 people in a
This guy's kind of a
studio
mix between
apartment, that kind
the
of thing.
social safety net and the
Yeah.
family support. It's kind of a mix of
There is a mix, and again, I think that's why sometimes when we look outside, it seems like everything's really dire, but then we're like, but everybody's sort of scraping by. How do they do it? It's because they do utilize kind of this mix of social safety nets and so on.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Troy says, Jessica, you are the new Bank of Thailand governor or even the prime minister for a month. You can do anything you want. What actions do you take?
Oh, gosh.
Beside changing the color of the uniforms of the police from a drab brown to maybe something more cool.
Well, if we change the color of the uniform, imagine how many people would be employed making new uniforms.
That's right. There we go. Look at that. I had an economics win-win idea.
Win-win. Gosh. Well, one thing I would do is actually work on better connecting people in case that we need to get out emergency relief. And of course, again, I'm coming from this as a labor economist and not as an economist that works more, I guess, on the business side or like the finance side. But just the ability to get money to people quickly if, for example, we have to go into a second lockdown and we need to make sure that we keep the domestic economy afloat while also making sure people are continuing to eat,
right, okay.
would be good. And then I would also probably just knowing that the international economy is not looking that great. So, international tourism is probably not going to be coming back right away. Some of the manufacturing that is really that's really focused on the export market, maybe we need to think about developing other parts of the domestic market. And, so thinking about policies to develop domestic markets and also just rethinking what we're doing. I mean, is it so good to be so dependent on international markets?
Right.
And, we talk about this all the time. We need to change the education. We need to, maybe this is the time we need to do that. Maybe we need to think about what is our goal.
Into opportunity, right?
Exactly. So where do we want to go? We hear all this stuff. Well, we want to be, a leader in technology. It's like, well, in order to do that, we need to kind of go all the way back to, kindergarten and think about the curriculum all the way up. So, if I were prime minister for a day, I would just change the education system.
You can't see this, listeners, but Jessica's eyes just got real wide.
So again, very labor economist point of view, thinking about the human capital that we are developing and, maybe nudging it in a different direction. Right. So.
Interesting. Yeah. I think actually you just crave power. That's why you finally all the decisions are mine. Okay. Mike has a good question. He says, since many people have been working from home, at least those who could, will there be a move by some employers to continue that model even after COVID? If so, how does that impact the many small restaurants, food stands, and shops that cater to all the thousands of people working in buildings in the core of Bangkok, not to mention commercial real estate and things like this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I kind of think that's not going to happen in the Thai case. I am still working at home, so I didn't expect to be working from home and teaching from home quite this long. But I have a feeling at the end of the semester, I mean, that's it. We're all going to be, everybody's like, okay, that's it. We're back on campus and everything. And I do go into the office a few days a week, and I feel like the traffic is worse now than it was. So I kind of feel like everybody is coming back, and people really do value those face-to-face communications, the ability to really work with people one-on-one in a live setting. And I know that I feel like there's some things that I just can't do online, even through Zoom, even though I can see the person. It's just like, if I'm trying to teach somebody how to code, I really feel like I need to be there sitting next to them. And it's really hard to do online. So I think I think most things have actually come back. I don't think we're going to see this big shift to online. And I do think that people have realized that there is a lot of value to being in person. Now, having said that, I also see a lot of these kind of special markets that are set up around office buildings and so on. Some of those haven't come back. And we have one at the university. We have two, actually. We have one on Tuesday and one on Friday outside of my faculty. And it hasn't come back. And it's been really heartbreaking for me because mean, that's lunch.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I do wonder how those vendors actually making it during these times when these things that they were counting on are not there. But hopefully they will return in full.
Right. All right. Our last question is from our buddy Gal, and this is interesting because in the when you were on the show last time, you talked a lot about the outlook and the expectations of your students. Mm-hmm. And Gao is a young guy, but he said he's looking for a job right now. And he said there are lots of jobs advertising, like on all these job websites, there's tons of jobs, but is it harder to find one now? Or is it like you and I were chatting earlier quickly about whether it's an employer's market or a job seeker's market? And it's an interesting mix of both, I think.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think because COVID was such a shock to the economy that a lot of places just reorganized. They took it as an opportunity to kind of get rid of, potentially dead wood, or, they're trying to go a different direction. They haven't been able to. This was the excuse to do that.
Right.
But the outcome of that is like, okay, we got rid of that group of people, but now we need people with this sort of expertise. And so I think I mentioned I was looking at these job database numbers, and it was a little shocking to see that there was so much hiring going on. The hiring was actually tracking the employees looking for job, or the job seekers.
Right.
And so it seems like there are jobs available in the economy, but again, there's also a lot of people looking for jobs as well. So it's probably more of a employer's market than it is an employee's market. But it's funny. I think if you have the right set of skills for what they're looking for, you're going to find a job right away. And I had mentioned to you before the show, I have a student who applied for this job. It was kind of a dream job. Like, there's no way I could ever get it, but it's a job that they would have hired somebody from abroad, and she happened to have the set of skills, but was already here in Thailand. And so they snapped her up, like, she sends in a resume on Saturday and they hire her on Sunday without an interview. So, it's just like it went fast. And,
nice.
On a holiday weekend, no less. So, there are jobs out there. And I think if you've got, especially a set of skills that are a little bit different, a little bit special, or in demand, you can find a job even in this market. But as I tell my students, you got to find something that's going to set yourself apart. And whether that be, learning a programming language that's not normal course in the university, just learning another language or being really good in a couple of different languages, you're going to be probably snapped up fairly quickly.
Interesting. All right. Well, things aren't great, but it's interesting that there are glimmers of light, green shoots.
I'm an optimist, so yeah. I look for the green shoots, and I think there are several in the Thai economy. Thais, as we've talked about before, are very entrepreneurial, and I've seen so many new businesses sprout up, and it gives me hope that we had this is a really bad thing, but there's hope. There's people doing what they need to do, and they're creative about it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well, Jessica, thanks so much for coming on again. Hopefully, maybe we can sit down again in another couple of months and check in about where things are. And hopefully we'll have gone from catastrophic back to dire.
Sounds good. I look forward to it.
It's bad when you're looking forward to dire.
Yeah.
Oh, please just let it be dire. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Dude, all I got to say is it's a pleasure to have someone who actually is an expert on the Thai economy instead of you and I just shooting the shit about it.
just spouting off on random tangents. Here's what I think based on nothing.
That's the story of our life. Hey, that's the story of the bank. That's the story of the Bangkok podcast.
Yeah, pretty much. So it was really cool. It's always interesting to get the numbers. And like I said in the interview, you hear like, oh, this is backed up by numbers, but as Jessica was explaining it, the numbers are actually kind of fuzzy sometimes too, because there's some conflicting stats in there, and they can almost add another level of confusion rather than sorting out the confusion. But it's cool to get some data backed info there.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, she's a great addition to the show, and I'm sure she'll be back at some point in the future.
Yeah, we'll check back in a few months.
Cool.
All right. Let's get into some love, loathe, or live with, where one of us picks a particular aspect of living in Bangkok, which we then discuss and decide if it's something we love about living here, loathe about living here, or have come to accept as something that we just have to learn to live with, no matter how we feel about it. And this week, man, it's all you.
All right, Mr. Greg. You've lived here a long time.
Yeah, I have.
Neither you nor I are experts on Thai culture, but of course we've got basic knowledge. We've learned something over the last 20 years.
We are commentators on Thai culture.
Yeah, we've got some basic knowledge. And you know, in Thai culture, younger people are supposed to bow to older people, correct or incorrect?
That is correct, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I'm just curious. You meet a Thai person who's clearly younger than you, and they don't why you. They don't bow. What's your take on that? Don't care?
Interesting.
Hate it? Is it?
Don't care.
Oh, so don't care. A young Thai person, 15 years old, they meet you and know why.
That's an interesting one. I say generally no, but I might notice it. Like if they didn't do it, I'd be like, guy didn't why me. And then I'd probably check myself like, actually, he doesn't need to why me. We're all equals here. We're all just people. So that's interesting. I probably would notice it, but I wouldn't care.
Okay.
So I would say live with. Yeah, I'll live with that.
Our listeners have probably figured out that when you and I do a love, loathe, or live with, it's usually because we want to talk about something. So we pretend
it's just an excuse.
We pretend that we want to hear the other guy's opinion, but it's really we have our own opinion.
This entire show exists solely for the purpose of us like bitching about our day.
Right. I got to tell you, it bothers me when younger Thai people don't whine me.
Really?
And here's why. So I don't believe in whying as a general concept. Like I don't think just because someone's older, they're necessarily right or that they're due some type of like special respect. I mean, I think all people are due just general respect. But it kind of frustrates me that here I am in Thailand and I'm trying to live by Thai rules. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. And I'm in Thailand and I'm just trying to follow the rules. And so if I think someone's older than me, I why them. So I find it kind of annoying when younger Thai people just meet a white person and they're like, I'm just going to throw out my entire culture, just my culture. Even though I'm in my own country, I'm just tossing everything I've been taught my whole life.
But don't you kind of appreciate the fact that maybe they're trying to like connect with you on your culture, on your level? Like we're trying to adapt to them because we're here, but maybe they're trying to adapt to our culture because they know we're Westerners.
No, not at all.
You know, it's like when I'm out on bike rides and I ride through like a Muslim village or something, I always, not always, but I try to say like, Assalamu alaikum when I pass someone who's obviously Muslim. And most of the time they say, alaikum assalam, back to me. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, but you know what I mean? Maybe they're just trying to connect with you on a cultural level.
The short answer is no. That's the short answer. No, I don't buy that because they're not doing something. In your case, you're saying assalamu alaikum. You're going out of your way to address a Muslim person in a polite Muslim way. But what's happening in this case is Thai people are not showing you the respect that they would show an older Thai person, and which, like outside of Thailand, that makes perfect sense. Like I if I met a Thai person in the States, I would not expect them to why me. Right. But the bottom line is we're in Thailand. So if they expect me to follow their rules, then they better follow their own rules as well. Like, am I crazy here? Like what?
I see.
What am I missing? I mean, okay, I want to be clear. I'm going to put this down as a loathe, but I mean, to be honest, it's not like it drives me crazy or like I'm really angry. Damn it. It's not, but it's almost, this is an on principle loathe.
Right.
I kind of feel disrespected. That's what I can say.
Interesting. That's a good one. Okay, I can see both sides of this coin, but still, for me, it doesn't bother me. No, I don't care.
All right. Well, you're broken and confused, but other than that, you and I get along really well.
We knew that.
So, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, we'd like to say thank you to JR for lending us his support at the show shout-out level. Greg, what did you find out about JR?
Well, and actually, this is going to be a very short, very easy shout out for JR because JR said he wants no recognition on the show, no shout out. But I know JR, he's a good dude. If you're listening, JR, thank you for your support, buddy. We appreciate it. And keep doing what you do because it's good stuff. And thanks, JR. That's it. That's all we got to say.
I'd say thanks, JR, as well. He doesn't want a big shout out. He doesn't get it. But thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right. A final thanks to our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping support the show. Find out more by clicking support on our website. And connect with us online. We're Bangkok Podcast on social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages.
True that. You can also listen to each episode on YouTube. You can chat with us online or send us a voicemail or even reach out to me directly on Twitter where I am BKK Greg. So thanks for listening, everyone. Take it easy, and we'll see you back here next week.
No doubt. Let me know if I'm too hot this week.
No, you're hot.
You know I'm hot. I don't have a shirt on.
Yeah. Listeners, you can see what I see.